To understand why the narcissist cannot recover from betraying a superempath, we have to first understand what the superempath actually represented in the narcissist's psychological economy. And it's far more complex than most people realize. The narcissist, as we know, operates on what's called narcissistic supply, external validation that temporarily fills the void where authentic self-worth should be. But not all supply is created equal. There's a hierarchy, a spectrum of quality that the narcissist intuitively recognizes, even if they can't articulate it. Most people the narcissist encounters offer what we might call surface supply. Admiration for their appearance, their status, their performance. It's transactional, replaceable, ultimately hollow. The narcissist consumes it quickly and needs constant replenishment because it doesn't actually nourish anything real. It's empty calories for a starving psyche. Then there's the superempath, and what they offer is something categorically different. The superempath doesn't just reflect the narcissist's grandiose self-image back to them. They actually see the person underneath the construct. They perceive the wound, the terror, the fragmented self that the narcissist has spent their entire life defending against. And here's what makes this so intoxicating and so dangerous for the narcissist. The superempath sees all of this and still chooses to stay, still offers compassion, still believes in their capacity for something more. This creates a type of supply the narcissist has likely never experienced before. Validation that feels real because it's coming from someone with genuine depth, authentic perception, and the emotional sophistication to hold paradox. The superempath can simultaneously see the narcissist's defended false self and their defended true self, and they respond to both with a kind of radical acceptance. For the narcissist, this is like discovering water after a lifetime in the desert. It's not just that the superempath makes them feel good about themselves. It's that the superempath makes them feel real, seen, known. And for someone whose entire psychological structure is built on hiding from being truly known, this is both terrifying and irresistible. The superempath also brings something else to the table, intellectual and emotional depth that actually challenges the narcissist. Unlike the typical supply sources who are easier to manipulate and control, the superempath engages with the narcissist at a level that stimulates them. There are real conversations, moments of genuine connection, exchanges that feel substantive rather than performative. The narcissist becomes addicted to this quality of interaction, in a way that's different from their addiction to regular supply. It's not just about maintaining their grandiose self-image, it's about experiencing something approximating authentic relationship, even if they can fully participate in it reciprocally. But here's the trap. The narcissist cannot actually metabolize this kind of supply in a healthy way. They can't integrate it, can't build on it, can't let it transform them. Instead, they consume it. They take and take from the superempath's depth, using it to feel momentarily whole, but they cannot give back in kind because they don't have access to their own emotional depths. They're drawing from a well they cannot replenish. And this is where the betrayal becomes inevitable. The narcissist's pathology eventually compels them to devalue and destroy the very thing they're most dependent on. Perhaps because the intimacy becomes too threatening. Perhaps because the superempath begins to require reciprocity. Perhaps because the narcissist's shame at being truly known becomes unbearable. Whatever the trigger, the narcissist sabotages the relationship in ways that are often spectacular in their cruelty. And then they lose it. They lose this unprecedented quality of supply. And here's what they discover in the aftermath. It cannot be replaced. The narcissist might find other sources of validation, other people to manipulate, other relationships to dominate, but they will never again find someone with that particular combination of depth, perception, tolerance, and genuine care. They will never again experience being seen that completely and accepted anyway. They will never again have access to that quality of connection, that level of intellectual and emotional stimulation. They've destroyed something irreplaceable, and on some level they know it. Every subsequent relationship becomes a disappointing echo of what they had and threw away. Every new source of supply feels shallow by comparison. They're trying to satisfy a hunger that only one specific type of nourishment could address, and they've permanently cut themselves off from it. You cannot replace someone who saw you completely and loved you anyway, especially once you've proven them right to leave. But the loss of supply, devastating as it is, points to something even more psychologically catastrophic for the narcissist, because what the super-empath actually represented was something the narcissist has organized their entire existence around avoiding being truly known. Let me explain what I mean by this. The narcissist's whole psychological architecture is essentially an elaborate defense system built to protect against a core wound, a profound sense of defectiveness, shame, or worthlessness that formed early in their development. Everything about the narcissistic presentation, the grandiosity, the superiority, the need for control, the lack of empathy, these aren't personality traits. They're armor. They're a fortress constructed to ensure that no one ever gets close enough to see what the narcissist believes is their fundamentally unlovable true self, and this defense works reasonably well with most people. The narcissist can maintain the facade, can keep people at the precise distance where they provide validation without penetration, admiration without actual intimacy. Most people never see past the mask because the narcissist never lets them close enough, or because those people don't have the perceptual capacity to see through the construction. But the superempath is different. The superempath has this almost uncanny ability to perceive what's happening beneath the surface. They can sense the wound underneath the grandiosity. They can feel the terror underneath the rage. They can detect the fragility underneath the apparent strength. And critically, they can hold all of this in their awareness simultaneously without being manipulated by the false self or destroyed by the narcissist's defenses. This means that for perhaps the first time in the narcissist's life, they're in a relationship with someone who actually knows them. Not the performed self, not the curated image, not the strategic presentation, but the actual fractured, terrified, shame-bound person underneath. And here's the paradox that the narcissist cannot resolve. Part of them desperately wants this. Part of them is starving for the experience of being truly seen and accepted anyway. This is the fantasy that drives their pursuit of the super-empath in the first place. But another part of them, the part organized around survival, finds this level of exposure absolutely intolerable. So throughout the relationship, the narcissist exists in this excruciating double bind. The super-empath's perception of their true self is simultaneously the thing they crave most and the thing they fear most. It's both the most intimate connection they've ever experienced and the most threatening. When the relationship ends, when the narcissist inevitably betrays this person and drives them away, something irreversible happens to the narcissist's defensive system, because now they have to live with the knowledge that someone saw through everything, all the way down to the core, and ultimately chose to leave anyway. This is fundamentally different from other relationship endings. When a typical supply source leaves, the narcissist can tell themselves a comfortable story. They couldn't handle me. They didn't understand me. They weren't on my level. They left the performance, but they never knew the real me. This allows the narcissist to maintain their defenses intact. But with the super-empath, this narrative doesn't work. The narcissist cannot deny that they were known, cannot pretend the empath just didn't understand, cannot hide behind the excuse that the empath only saw the surface. The super-empath saw everything: the wound, the defense, the pattern, the pathology, and the empath still left, not from ignorance, but from clarity, not from inability to handle complexity, but from self-respect. This completely destabilizes the narcissist's core defensive structure. If someone can see you that completely and still choose to walk away, what does that say about what they saw? If the one person who understood you most deeply ultimately concluded that you weren't worth staying for, how do you defend against the implication that maybe the shameful, defective self you've been hiding really is who you are? The narcissist cannot recover from this because it's not just a loss, it's a validation of their deepest fear. It's evidence that being truly known leads to abandonment. It confirms the very thing they've organized their entire life around avoiding. And worse, they can't unknow that they've been known. They can't rebuild the wall that's been permanently breached. Every future relationship becomes haunted by this experience. The narcissist now knows what it feels like to be truly seen, which means they know what they're hiding from everyone else. They know the difference between someone who's fooled by the mask and someone who sees through it, and they know that the one person who saw through it completely chose to leave. This creates a kind of psychological scar tissue that never fully heals. The narcissist might find new supply, might craft new relationships, might even convince themselves they've moved on. But there's always this awareness, often unconscious, that they were once fully known and fully rejected, that someone had complete access to who they actually are and decided that wasn't enough. And perhaps most painfully, the narcissist knows, even if they can never admit it, that the superempath's departure wasn't cruel or vindictive. It was simply the natural consequence of the narcissist's own actions. The empath didn't leave because they misunderstood or couldn't handle the narcissist. They left because they understood completely and chose themselves instead. The narcissist cannot rebuild what the superempath's knowledge dismantled, the illusion that remaining unknown keeps them safe. Let's talk about what happens in the practical, day-to-day reality of the narcissist's life after the superempath leaves. Because beyond the psychological devastation of being known and abandoned, there's something more immediate and visceral. The narcissist must now face the one thing they've spent their entire existence avoiding: themselves. The superempath, you see, wasn't just providing validation or even deep connection. They were functioning as what we might call an emotional regulator for the narcissist's inner chaos. And I want to be very clear about what I mean by this, because it's not the same as codependency or enabling, though it can appear similar on the surface. The narcissist's internal world is fundamentally dysregulated. Without a coherent sense of self, without access to genuine self-worth, without the capacity. Thank you for self-soothing or emotional integration. The narcissist exists in a state of chronic inner instability. They're constantly oscillating between grandiosity and collapse, between rage and emptiness, between the terror of being nothing and the exhausting performance of being everything. Most people in the narcissist's life can't handle this level of internal chaos. They're either completely fooled by the grandiose presentation, or they're quickly overwhelmed and retreat. But the superempath has this extraordinary and ultimately self-destructive capacity to hold space for the narcissist's contradictions, to remain calm in the face of their rage, to provide grounding when they're spiraling, to offer a kind of stable presence that the narcissist's own psyche cannot generate. Over time, the narcissist becomes profoundly dependent on this regulatory function. The superempath becomes the container for feelings the narcissist cannot process, the anchor when their sense of self fragments, the mirror that reflects back a coherent identity when their own threatens to dissolve. And because the superempath does this so consistently, so skillfully, the narcissist doesn't even recognize it's happening. They just know that somehow, in this person's presence, they feel more real, more stable, more whole than they do anywhere else. Then the empath leaves, and suddenly, catastrophically, that regulatory function disappears. Now the narcissist is alone with the full force of their internal chaos. All the feelings they never learned to process, all the self-fragmentation they never learned to integrate, all the emptiness they never learned to fill from within. It's all still there, but now there's no one to help them manage it. There's no one to absorb their rage without retaliating, no one to witness their vulnerability without weaponizing it, no one to reflect back a coherent self when they're fracturing. This is different from missing someone. This is different from grief. This is the experience of losing a crucial part of your own psychological functioning, like losing a limb you didn't know you were dependent on until it was gone. And here's what makes this so devastating for the narcissist. They cannot articulate what they've lost. They don't have the emotional vocabulary or the self-awareness to say, I depended on this person to regulate my nervous system, to contain my projections, to stabilize my sense of self. Instead, they just experience a void, an unbearable gnawing absence that nothing seems to fill. So they try to fill it. They find new supply, new relationships, new sources of validation. But here's the problem. No one else has the superempath's unique combination of depth, resilience, perceptiveness, and tolerance. No one else can perform that regulatory function at the same level. The new supply might be attractive, might be successful, might even be kind, but they lack the emotional sophistication to hold the narcissist's complexity. They're either too shallow to perceive what the narcissist actually needs, or they're too healthy to provide it. They set boundaries where the superempath had limitless patience. They retreat where the superempath would have stayed. They demand reciprocity where the superempath gave unconditionally. And so the void remains. The narcissist keeps searching for what they lost, but they're searching for something that cannot be replicated. They're trying to find someone who will do the impossible work of making them feel whole, the way the superempath did, but that person doesn't exist. Or if they do exist, they're another superempath who's already learned not to sacrifice themselves for someone who cannot reciprocate. The narcissist begins to realize on some level that they're alone with themselves in a way they've never been before. And this aloneness is unbearable because the narcissist's self is not a safe place to be. It's a place of shame, emptiness, fragmentation, terror. It's precisely what all the grandiosity and manipulation and control were designed to escape from. Without the superempath's regulatory presence, the narcissist faces the horrifying truth. They don't actually know how to be with themselves. They've never developed the capacity for self-soothing, self-reflection, self-compassion. They've outsourced all of that to others, and specifically to the one person who could do it at the level they needed. And now that person is gone. Not just physically absent, but psychologically unavailable in a permanent way. The superempath has closed the door, set the boundary, reclaimed their energy. They're no longer willing to be the narcissist's emotional regulator, their container, their stabilizer. The narcissist is left with the one companion they've spent a lifetime fleeing, their own unintegrated self. And unlike the superempath, that self offers no comfort, no regulation, no relief. Just an echoing emptiness that no amount of new supply can fill, because what's missing is an external validation. It's the one person who could make the narcissist's internal world feel bearable. The cruelest irony is that the narcissist drove away the only person who made them feel less alone with themselves. But there is another dimension to this loss that cuts even deeper, something that strikes at the very heart of the narcissist's carefully constructed self-narrative. Because the superempath wasn't just regulating the narcissist's emotions or providing superior supply. They were serving as living proof of the narcissist's fundamental goodness. Let me explain what I mean. The narcissist lives in a perpetual state of what we might call ontological insecurity, a deep uncertainty about their own worth, their own lovability, their own right to exist. Everything they do, all the grandiosity and manipulation, is ultimately an attempt to answer a question they can never quite resolve. Am I fundamentally bad, or am I special? Most of the narcissist relationships don't actually help them answer this question. Casual admirers are too easily fooled. Their validation feels hollow because the narcissist knows they're only seeing the performance. People they've manipulated or dominated can't provide evidence of goodness because the narcissist knows they've coerced that devotion. Even family members who remain loyal often feel like obligations rather than choices. But the superempath? The superempath was different. This was someone of genuine depth, integrity, and emotional sophistication who chose, of their own free will with full awareness, to love the narcissist. Someone who saw past the mask and still stayed. Someone who witnessed the narcissist's worst moments and still offered compassion. Someone whose own character was so clearly good that their presence became evidence that the narcissist must be good too. The narcissist thinks, look at who chose me. Look at the quality of person who saw value in me. Someone this perceptive, this emotionally intelligent, this genuinely loving. They wouldn't stay with someone who was truly bad, would they? The superempath's presence becomes the narcissist's most convincing argument against their own deep-seated belief in their fundamental defectiveness. This is why narcissists often display their empathic partners like trophies, but with an emotional investment that goes far beyond typical narcissistic showing off. They're not just saying, look how attractive my partner is, or look how accomplished they are. They're saying, look who chose to be with me. This proves I'm worthy of real love. This proves I'm not the monster I secretly fear I am. The superempath becomes the narcissist's redemption narrative made flesh. As long as this person stays, as long as they continue to love and believe in the narcissist despite everything, the narcissist can maintain the fragile hope that they are capable of genuine connection, that they're worthy of authentic love, that beneath all the pathology there's something redeemable. And then comes the betrayal. The narcissist, driven by their pathology, does exactly what their disorder compels them to do. They devalue, they manipulate, they betray. Perhaps it's infidelity, perhaps it's cruelty, perhaps it's a pattern of disrespect that finally becomes too much. The specific betrayal almost doesn't matter. What matters is that it's bad enough, destructive enough to finally break the super empath's seemingly infinite capacity for understanding. And when the super empath leaves, not in anger or hysteria, but with the clarity and self-respect that comes from genuine healing, the narcissist's entire redemption narrative collapses. Because this departure carries a message that the narcissist cannot escape. I saw all of you. I understood the wound beneath the behavior. I had compassion for your suffering. I believed in your potential. And after all of that, after truly knowing you, after genuinely loving you, I'm choosing to leave because what you did is unacceptable. Because who you are in practice, regardless of who you might be in theory, is not someone I can continue to love without destroying myself. This is categorically different from other people leaving. When someone leaves who never really knew the narcissist can tell themselves that person just didn't understand. But the super empath understood completely. Their departure isn't a misunderstanding, it's a verdict. The one person whose love could have served as evidence of the narcissist's fundamental goodness has withdrawn that love based on full information. The one person whose judgment the narcissist actually trusted because of their perceptiveness and integrity has rendered judgment. And it's damning. The narcissist can no longer tell themselves, if people really knew me, they'd love me. Someone really knew them. Someone really saw them. And that person concluded that the narcissist's behavior, the inevitable expression of their pathology, makes them unworthy of continued love and presence. This destroys the narcissist's last refuge, the fantasy that somewhere beneath all the disorder there's a good person waiting to be discovered. Because the one person equipped to discover that goodness looked for it, believed in it, gave it every opportunity to emerge, and finally had to accept that it either doesn't exist or is so buried under pathology that it makes no practical difference. The narcissist cannot find another super empath to restore this narrative because any other super empath will eventually reach the same conclusion. The problem isn't that the first super empath didn't understand or couldn't handle them. It's that they understood perfectly and made a choice based on that understanding. And so the narcissist is left without their most important piece of evidence in the case they're constantly trying to make to themselves that despite everything, they're still worthy of real love. The super empath was that evidence, and through their own actions, the narcissist destroyed it. When the person who knew you best decides you're not worth staying for, no amount of new admirers can fill that void. If all of this weren't painful enough for the narcissist, there's another layer to their inability to recover, and this one is particularly excruciating because it plays out in real time, often in ways the narcissist can observe from a distance. The super empath doesn't just leave. They leave and then they heal. They grow. They transform. And they do it visibly, tangibly, in ways that make it impossible for the narcissist to construct a comfortable narrative about the relationship's end. You see, in most of the narcissist's previous relationships, when things ended, the narcissist could maintain a particular story. They fell apart without me. They couldn't handle me. They're stuck in their small life, while I've moved on to bigger and better things. The narcissist gets to be the one who's evolved, who's transcended, who's outgrown the relationship. This narrative is essential for maintaining their grandiose self-image. But with the super empath, this story doesn't hold. Not even close. The super empath leaves and enters what is often the most profound growth period of their life. They finally stop abandoning themselves for someone else. They reclaim the energy they'd been pouring into a bottomless void. They redirect their extraordinary capacity for depth and perception inward, toward their own healing. And the transformation is often dramatic. The narcissist might watch, through social media, through mutual friends, through whatever windows remain, as the super empath begins to thrive in ways they never did during the relationship. Their creativity flourishes, their career advances, they form healthier relationships, they radiate a kind of peace and self-possession that they never had when they were managing the narcissist's chaos. And this visible thriving sends an unmistakable message that the narcissist cannot misinterpret. The problem was the relationship. More specifically, the problem was the narcissist. Because here's what the super empath's growth proves. They were being held back. All that depth, all that capacity, all that emotional intelligence that the narcissist was feeding on, it was being drained away, channeled into the impossible task of trying to love someone who couldn't receive love, trying to heal someone who wouldn't do the work of healing themselves. Once freed from that dynamic, the super empath doesn't collapse or diminish. They expand. They become fully themselves. They step into their potential in ways that were impossible when they were constantly regulating someone else's nervous system, managing someone else's fragility, absorbing someone else's projections. For the narcissist, this is unbearable to witness because it contradicts everything they need to believe. In the narcissist's worldview, they're supposed to be the special one, the evolved one, the one who outgrows others. But here's the super empath, demonstrably outgrowing the narcissist. Not through superiority or one-upmanship, but through the simple act of choosing themselves and doing the work of genuine healing. And unlike the narcissist, who might cycle through relationships and maintain surface-level changes while their core pathology remains untouched, the super empath's transformation is real. It's not a performance. It's not image management. It's actual integration, actual growth, actual evolution. You can see it in how they carry themselves, how they speak about the relationship without bitterness or ongoing entanglement, how they've genuinely moved on rather than just moving to the next distraction. This creates a devastating comparison that the narcissist cannot escape. While the narcissist remains fundamentally unchanged, still cycling through the same patterns with new supply, still trapped in the same defensive structures, still avoiding the same core wound, the super empath has actually transformed. They've used the pain of the relationship as raw material for genuine development. The narcissist might find new partners, new sources of validation, new stages for their performance. But none of it represents real change. They're running the same program with different actors. And on some level, they know this. They know they're still the same person, still driven by the same fears, still defended by the same mechanisms. Meanwhile, the super empath has become someone new. Not because they're superior, but because they did what the narcissist cannot do. They faced themselves honestly. They felt their pain without projecting it onto others. They took responsibility for their part in staying too long. And they committed to genuine healing, rather than just managing their image. This divergence becomes increasingly stark over time. Years might pass, and the narcissist is still essentially the same. Perhaps with a different partner who they're treating the same way, perhaps more isolated, perhaps more bitter, but fundamentally unchanged. The super empath, meanwhile, has continued to evolve, to deepen, to become more integrated and whole. And the narcissist sees this. They see evidence of what's possible when someone actually does the work of healing. They see a living demonstration that transformation is real, that people can change, that there's a way out of the patterns that trap us. But they also see that they're not doing it. That despite all their grandiosity and all their claims of evolution, they remain stagnant while the person they discarded has blossomed. This is perhaps the most painful mirror of all. Not the mirror the super empath held up during the relationship, showing the narcissist who they were, but the mirror they hold up after leaving, showing the narcissist who they could have been if they'd been capable of choosing growth over defense, vulnerability over grandiosity, authentic change over the PE. Our formats of change. The super empath's healing doesn't just represent their own freedom. It represents the narcissist's foreclosed possibility, their road not taken, the life they might have lived if they'd been capable of doing the work. And that's a loss from which the narcissist truly cannot recover. The most devastating proof of your stagnation is watching someone flourish in the space where they once diminished themselves loving you. And now we arrive at what might be the most tragic dimension of this loss, the one that speaks to the deepest form of human devastation. Because the super empath didn't just see who the narcissist was. They saw who the narcissist could become. This is something we need to sit with for a moment because it's fundamentally different from everything else we've discussed. The super empath's perception wasn't limited to the narcissist's current state, the pathology, the defenses, the wounded self hiding beneath the grandiosity. The super empath, with their extraordinary depth and their perhaps naive faith in human potential, could also perceive something else, the person the narcissist might be, if they chose healing. This vision wasn't delusion. It wasn't the fantasy of someone who couldn't see reality. The superempath saw the reality perfectly. They just also saw the potential. They could hold both truths simultaneously. This is who you are now, and this is who you could become. And more remarkably, they believed in that potential. They believed it enough to stay far longer than they should have. They believed it enough to endure treatment that no one should endure. They believed in the narcissist's capacity for change, even when the narcissist didn't believe in it themselves. For the narcissist, this belief was simultaneously their greatest hope and their greatest burden, because part of them desperately wanted to become that better version of themselves. Part of them resonated with the superempath's vision, felt the pull of that possible redemption. In moments of vulnerability, rare and quickly defended against, the narcissist might have glimpsed what the superempath saw, a path toward wholeness, toward genuine connection, toward freedom from the prison of their own pathology. But another part of them, the part organized around survival and defense, found this vision terrifying, because becoming that person would require the very thing the narcissist's entire structure is designed to prevent: facing the wound, feeling the shame, acknowledging the damage they've caused, sitting with the unbearable vulnerability of not knowing who they are without their defenses. So the narcissist remained trapped between these two poles, the desire to become what the superempath believed they could be, and the terror of what that transformation would require. And in that trap, they did what their pathology always compels them to do. They chose defense over growth. They chose the familiar pain of their disorder over the unknown pain of healing. They betrayed not just the superempath, but the vision the superempath held of their potential. And when the superempath finally leaves, when they accept that the narcissist is choosing pathology over possibility, defense over development, something irreversible happens. The narcissist doesn't just lose a person, they lose the last witness to their redemptive potential. They lose the only person who could see them at their worst and still maintain faith in their capacity for something better. No one else will believe in them that way again. And here's why: because belief of that caliber requires a specific combination of depth, perception, and radical acceptance that is extraordinarily rare. It requires someone who can see through the defenses without being fooled by them, someone who can perceive potential without being naive about present reality, someone whose own character is solid enough to maintain hope in another person's growth, even while that person actively undermines it. The superempath was that rare combination. And the narcissist destroyed their faith not through a single dramatic betrayal, but through the accumulation of 1,000 smaller ones. Through the consistent choice to protect the false self rather than risk revealing the true self. Through the pattern of hurting the one person who believed in their healing. Through the fundamental refusal to do the terrifying work of genuine transformation. When the superempath finally withdraws their belief, not in anger but in acceptance, they take with them the narcissist's last tether to the possibility of redemption, because everyone else in the narcissist's life either believes in the grandiose false self, which isn't real, or sees only the pathology, which offers no hope. The superempath was the only one who held both truths. I see who you are, and I see who you could be, and I believe you're capable of bridging that gap. After the superempath leaves, the narcissist might encounter other people who believe in them, but that belief will always feel hollow because it's based on incomplete information. New partners might admire the false self, but the narcissist knows they're being fooled. Therapists might maintain hope for their healing, but the narcissist can keep them at arm's length, never truly vulnerable. Friends might stay loyal, but the narcissist knows they don't see the full picture. Only the superempath saw everything and still believed. And the narcissist has permanently forfeited that belief through their own choices. This creates a particular kind of despair that the narcissist may never fully articulate, even to themselves. It's the despair of knowing that someone once saw your best possible self, not as flattery, not as manipulation, but as genuine perception, and you systematically destroyed their faith in your ability to become that self. You proved them wrong about you, but in the worst possible way. You demonstrated that their belief was misplaced not because they misjudged your potential, but because you refused to reach for it. the narcissist is left haunted by a ghost, the person they could have been if they had the courage to meet the super-empath's belief with action. That ghost follows them into every subsequent relationship, every new beginning, every moment when they might choose differently but don't, because now they know what's possible. They've seen themselves through eyes that perceived their potential, and they've chosen, again and again, to remain who they are rather than become who they could be. The super-empath took with them not just their love, not just their regulatory presence, not just their validation. They took the narcissist's last real chance at believing in their own redemption, because no one else will ever believe in them with that particular combination of clarity and hope, truth and faith, unflinching perception and unwavering compassion. And the narcissist knows, in whatever capacity they're capable of knowing anything real about themselves, that they deserved that belief and they destroyed it. That someone saw the best in them and they repaid that vision with betrayal. That they were offered a path toward healing and they chose pathology instead. When you destroy the faith of the only person who could see both who you are and who you might become, you lose more than their presence. You lose your own possibility.